Alright guys, Kremp again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. Dashy has given his perspective on OpTic potentially not making it to this year's World Championship. Shotzzy gave his thoughts on this a few weeks ago now and said, look, you guys must think we're terrible. We're definitely going to make champs. But over the last few weeks, it's become clear that that is not exactly going to be clear cut. Their qualifiers didn't end in the best possible way. Their major was once again a top 8 finish. Dashy says, look, he backed himself. He backs the team to make it to the World Championship. And right now, in terms of seeding, it's not looking pretty regardless. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I would greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into. Of course, Beans and everyone were talking about a few things over the last few days. Certainly the Mercury's piece. But I did just want to mention this real quick on the meta that we currently have in the game, because the meta is set to shift going forwards. Now, the meta may effectively stay the same, but there are changes to the JACL that have come through, and therefore the Challengers players playing on the newer patch, they have been using Long Barrel on the JACL instead. Now, there was a bit of talk about the aims, right? Because this gunfight win that Geo has here, I mean, like, he absolutely incinerates the poor guy. And, well, as TJ says, can't wait to run Long Barrel next stage with the intention to kind of say, look, the sub isn't good enough. And as TJ says, they ran 3 to 4 of them in both hardpoints, right? So, yeah, it does feel a little bit like the aims, the AR, taken a bit more prominence as of the last few weeks, but of course, the SMG players probably are going to say that. You guys know how it is at this point. But yeah, talking point anyway, because in a couple of days' time, they'll play on a different patch, and that's probably going to mean different GAs, and potentially different results and benefactors as well. This was the run that Thieves made to the title. They started off beating Ravens, beating Heretics, beating Surge, and beating Surge again. So, you know, you might argue that it's not the most challenging run, but Heretics also made it to the Sunday, of course. FaZe bombed out early, not Thieves' fault on that one. And, you know, obviously FaZe, they lost to Surge, who Thieves beat twice, and they lost to Heretics, who also Thieves took down as well. So you wouldn't imagine it'd have been too much different. Ultra made a very commendable run, beating Gentlemates, beating Rocker, beating Boston, beating Heretics. You know, apart from the first series, nothing was incredibly dominant. The Boston series kind of was, to be fair. But, and then, of course, they went down to Surge in the end. But, you know, great tournament in many respects, very interesting one. There was thankfully a couple of game 5s towards the end of the tournament, because early on it was very, very clear cut indeed. But of course, the roster changes that we discussed earlier today will attempt to right that to some degree. But some interesting stats on this. Cellium finished the event with a positive KD again. Now, look, it's still going to take a very long time for Cellium to catch up to these type of numbers, but if you guys aren't aware, Scump has the all-time records of consecutive events with a 1 or a higher KD in the tournament. Cellium has now done so at 27 consecutive events. Really, what makes Scump's record here so impressive is the fact that he did so on an SMG, in my opinion, and we're still going to be, what, like 3 years away from Cellium being able to challenge this record, but, you know, given the amount of events that we currently have in a year, but still, it's one to keep an eye on. The player just behind Cellium, actually, we'll get to, I think, towards the end of the video, but I may have the stats now to bring up for you guys real quick. Here it is. So actually, just behind Cellium is HyDra, which is kind of wild that HyDra has now had 25 consecutive events with a positive KD. You know, that really is the Scump line to keep an eye on, because he's doing it on the sub. Scrap is at 10, Geo's at 6, Insight's at 6, Beans is at 6, JoeDeceives at 3, and Simp is at 9. So Simp's really the only other player here on the SMG who's able to do something like this. But yeah, for Cellium to be at 27 and 0, but HyDra at 25 is, to me, a bit more impressive. And look, I was asked the question, we asked the question of many people back at Major 2 in Dallas. We were doing the quickfire stuff, and we were saying, like, look, who's the best player in the game? At the time, I said Scrap. He won the MVP yesterday. But, I mean, going into this weekend, I would have said HyDra. And, but I think that both of those, you know, ideas apply really. And Cellium isn't too far away from the conversation as well. Like, Cellium's been real good this year too. But, right now I would lean towards the boys on Thieves. They did also just win the event. Interestingly enough too, HyDra's 1.49 KD is the 5th highest finals KD in the history of the CDL lands. Cellium actually at Major 2 had an even higher one, right? So yeah, poor Surge man getting absolutely slammed. Obviously there was a couple from Champs 2023 where Scrappy got slammed. Simp at Atlanta 2020 held the record for quite some time until that changed relatively recently. But these are the standings as they stand going into the World Championship, right? So Look, Falcons are 1 in 23. It's not been great. They have 17 map wins all season. Gentlemate's a bit better than them, but not really much so. And the rest of the bracket has actually become pretty clear, right? Look, it's not over yet for technically really anyone. Theoretically, Rocker and Cloud9 could, come top 1, top 2 at the next tournament, and they could still make it to champs. I mean, even then, Falcons, if they win the next tournament, they get to 110. And if they win all their qualifiers, they get another 50 points. That's 160. So technically, Falcons could still qualify. It will be, a few days, probably a couple of weeks before technically the Falcons are officially eliminated from champs. But look, Cloud9 or Rocker, they could come 1-2 next event, and they could both qualify and overtake some serious teams. The reality is, it's a fight for the 8th spot, because Heretics are looking pretty good, Boston are looking pretty good. Both of those teams should be able to pick up at least another couple of wins online. My guess was that the cutoff for champs would be something like 175, 180. And that looks like that might be about right, to be fair. I think we'll see. Like, Rocker will need to, 3 wins from them in the qualifiers, and then a top 6 or a top 4. That would get them to roughly 175, 180, 190-ish, like something in that ballpark anyway. So that would potentially get the job done. So the Heretics and Boston, look, they've basically made it, I would say now. They just need, I would say, a couple more series wins in the qualifiers, and they'll be happy enough making champs. It's OpTic that find themselves now in no man's land, right? Because this stage has definitely separated the wheat from the chaff, as it were. We've got some separation up top. Ravens have now fallen back into, they're kind of on their own as well, and they're down in there in the 5th seed, and they could potentially drop even further if their recent run of form continues. The top teams have really separated themselves though, right? I mean, we've got 4 teams with 300 or more points, which is pretty impressive. Only 3 majors into the season. Toronto at 310, Surge at 300, and FaZe have been dethroned. I mentioned it yesterday. I don't know if FaZe have ever not been leading the standings after the 3rd major of the season, because usually that's just how it is. But no, this season Thieves for now are ahead. Whether they'll end the season ahead, I don't know. That was my prediction going into the year, that this Thieves team was going to dethrone FaZe as the number 1 seed at the end of the season. That's happened now. But there is, of course, still plenty more Call of Duty to be played. But Thieves getting to 102 map wins to only 42 losses, like, that's really impressive, right? Because, like, FaZe's series win-loss is still excellent, 27-9, Thieves are 29-8. But Thieves' win-loss in terms of map count is significantly better, right? I mean, 102 in 42 is actually pretty outrageous. Like, to win way more than double the maps you lose is a pretty incredible record, and their last 2 stages in a row statistically have just been mind-blowingly effective, and they only tend to lose maps to teams that are actually really damn good. But I think the OpTic question is the big one, right? Because they're sitting at 145. Certainly not safe, but not bad. It could be worse. But I know that OpTic fans will look at the fact that, they've won nearly half, or like Thieves have won nearly double. I think that's the best way to put it, right? Like, OpTic have won 55 maps this season. Thieves have won, near enough 110, which would be double, which is a crazy discrepancy. But they got blessed, if you want to say, by the fact that Rocker eventually lost out to Mercules and to Toronto. They then dropped down at 115, and Cloud9 at 105. A real big task ahead of them. But realistically, right, Rocker and Cloud9, they're not thinking, okay, we're going to overtake Boston, we're going to overtake Miami. That was probably their feeling a couple of weeks ago. But now they're feeling as, okay, OpTic are the vulnerable team. OpTic are the team that we've got to try and dethrone. And that is what they're going to be looking to do. So it's a 30-point gap as it stands. How quickly could they overturn that? Well, it wouldn't take that long if OpTic fall off, but OpTic also have to understand that probably, 3 wins in the qualifiers and another top 8, that would get them to 190 points. That's probably going to be enough. Realistically speaking, if OpTic go 3-2 in the qualifiers and they win like a series on LAN, they should get there. But of course, it depends how well Rocker do, or even Cloud9 potentially, but of course Rocker are the big candidates right now. Thought I would give some credit to Shotzzy as well. Of course, Shotzzy has been under some pretty heavy fire recently because of his comments in January, but also the fact that he is the warlord, the team's built around him, whatever you want to say, and yet the team hasn't really been delivering. But he did actually play really well, I would say, in general this tournament. OpTic have some questions to answer there, but JoeDeceives are the 1.12, Cell with a 1.12, and then it was the duo, HyDra and Scrap, with a 1.27, 1.22 respectively. So Yeah, that is, look, maybe no surprise, but still pretty scary for the rest of the league. But talking of the Champs qualification, right, of course, Thieves should be going in as the #1 seed. Well, at least on recent evidence, maybe that will turn around. But Dashy gave his thoughts on whether they're going to make it to Champs. So obviously, Shotzzy talked about this a few weeks ago and said, yeah, we're going to make Champs. You guys must think we're terrible. What are you talking about? Now, of course, it's more of a question, but Dashy says, look, I've got the confidence. We're going to make it to Champs. I'm never going to bet against myself.
Be honest, are we not about to make champs? Are we not about to make champs? I would never bet against myself, bro. No matter how, I'll never bet against myself or my team, bro. Regardless of anything. Could be the worst team, could be the best team. Could have one hand, could have no fingers left. Could be, I don't know, forced to play with my fucking feet. I would never bet against myself.
Of course, the one thing to keep in mind, though, is that, okay, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, if OpTic were to win 3 qualifiers, get a series win at the major, they should be fine for Champs, probably. But if they do make Champs in the 8th seed, they will play Thieves round 1, or possibly FaZe. And that's not really ideal. Like, look, maybe it doesn't matter anyway, because if you're OpTic, you're either going to play round 1 at Champs, Toronto, FaZe, Thieves, bare minimum. Like, whatever you do, that's just how it's going to be. And maybe Surge if they get the 3rd seed right, and OpTic get up to 6th. But, yeah, on recent evidence, it's going to be tough regardless. I think if you're FaZe, there's, some people if you're a FaZe fan, you actually might prefer to be the 2nd seed and play Boston round 1 than play OpTic, just because that can be potentially a bit of a bogey series. Now, these are the qualifier schedules, and this is important to keep in mind. Thought it was pretty funny. JoeDeceives went on the website and saw that OpTic were at 160 and Rocker at 145 and was like, damn, this is hella close. And then, of course, realized that, as always, the CDL site is wrong. If you want the real stats, go to breakingpoint.gg. But I imagine they've changed it by now. Don't really spend too much time on there, to be honest. But, look, the point still stands. These are the qualifiers that they play. These are OpTic's matchups. These are Minnesota's matchups. And they are very, very similar, like basically the same. So, OpTic plays Surge, and Minnesota play Surge. OpTic played Boston, and Minnesota actually played Falcons. So that's the difference there. But apart from, okay, Boston for OpTic, Falcons for Minnesota, like you'll take Minnesota in that spot, you would say right now. OpTic play Ravens, definitely winnable. Minnesota play Ravens. OpTic play Gentlemates, definitely winnable. Minnesota play Gentlemates. And they both play Toronto too, so you actually can write the fact that the script is very similar for both teams. OpTic will be very confident they can beat Ravens and Gentlemates, of course. The Surge and Toronto series are going to be tough. Maybe it comes down to that Boston series. If OpTic could win that one, maybe get to 3-2, that'd be a huge result. For Minnesota, they also need to get at least 3 wins on the board. And yeah, those Toronto and Surge series are going to be difficult, but who knows? Maybe changes will come through and make this situation seem a little bit more plausible. So definitely intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Do you buy what OpTic is selling right now? And, are they going to make it? And even if they do make it, does it massively matter in terms of the run that they could make? The funny thing is for me that Toronto, of course, playing OpTic, they're hosting this tournament up there in Kitchener. And already, it's a bit of an ask for people to get up to Kitchener for the World Championship, right? I think that's probably evident enough. Even for those that live in like Toronto, it's obviously, it can be a bit of a trek, especially to stay there for a couple of days and all this. So, there's a question, right, on if OpTic weren't at Champs either, then what does it look like? Because I'm sure there are some people waiting to see if OpTic qualify to then maybe get their tickets so I can get it all sorted. So maybe Toronto in that final series against OpTic think, 10 points for OpTic here, might be a good idea, get them to Champs, and then, we sell more tickets. I don't know, I'm just saying. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.
Fucking,
we should be asking, but what does Thieves do? Are they playing 3v2 bounties?
Yes, they do. Fuck yeah, they do.
Alright, let's play bounties. I can't join. Your shit's like unjoinable.
Are we running game twist then? Or reinforce?
Yo, join the game, bro.
I'm trying, bro. What do you?
You're not on the game. You're on Warzone.
haBeZy, I'm literally, you dragged me into BO6. You literally dragged me single-handedly into BO6.
He dragged me back into the fucking pit.
Says user doesn't. This is a free-to-play user and cannot access this content.
That's it. Just go back to Warzone. Go back to Warzone. Oh, okay, it should not work. Multiplayer, join sib, nothing.
Why did he just join us and then you just make him host?
Oh yeah, you can host. Yeah, you can host. Yeah, perfect. I'm down.
Join then.
Wait, I don't have permission. It's my invite only closed. You gotta open that shit, y'all. I know you got like Hello Ori and Warzone. You guys need to open your live so I can do it.
I'm host?
Yeah, I mean, bro, you're Texas, bro. Texas host, bro.